All right, guys, like I said, this is going to be a really complicated lesson, and it's probably one of the most important lessons I'm going to teach you. So whenever we get around to doing the big exercise for this YouTube video, I'm going to scrutinize this, and I'm probably going to give out a lot of twos. And those twos mean you've done the assignment, but you haven't mastered the material. As I'm going to start getting really tough with this stuff because these are the nuts and bolts of what you need to learn in order to really tighten up your writing. This is grammar. This is pure grammarness that we're getting into. Holy moly, can you feel the grammar, people? I'm going to calm down now. What I want you to do is, let me explain to you the best way of viewing this video. I have a link down there to the comma formula sheet. Now, you can go ahead and click that link and look at the handout, or what I think would be better is to go to the library and print this thing out. That way you don't have to switch between videos and the screen with the handout on it. It'd be better to hold this in your hand as I'm explaining it to you. And again, feel free to pause this video at any time. Dial it back. Look at the handout. Think about what I'm telling you. And I'm going to try to take this slow. Let me begin with this. How many times have you guys heard a teacher say to you, you put a comma where a pause is? That is not true. It is 100% not true. It might sound right every once in a while, but for the most part, that logic will hurt you. You're going to end up putting commas in places they would never go. What you need to understand is there's a logic to this. There's a structure to where we put commas. Now, I'm not going to teach you the really advanced stuff. I'm going to teach you the basic nuts and bolts to get you to communicate clearly. And the best way to do this is to use this comma formula sheet, what I call the comma calculator. Now, when we do math, one of the things that you have is that you have a calculator that can perform complex calculations for you so that you know you're on the right track, so that you know you're producing correct answers, right? We've never had a really good language correlation for that. And this is my opportunity, this is my effort to try to provide you with something that can give you a similar type of calculation so that you know you're executing a grammar rule correctly. Without further ado, let's look at the handout. I'm bringing it up on my screen right now. And again, one of the things that I want to do later on is to try to make it to where I can actually show you this handout in the video. But right now, it would be probably good just to have it in your hand, okay? Or be looking at it. Let's look at the comma calculator. At the top, formula sheet for commas and punctuation of clauses. A clause is simply a thought, an expression. They could be complete or incomplete. So what I need you guys to understand right now, first and foremost, is the difference between a dependent and an independent clause. And you'll see those in number 1, independent clauses. Now, independent clauses are full ideas, complete ideas that can stand alone as a complete sentence. Let me give you an example. I went to the lighthouse. I went to the lighthouse. You'll notice that has a subject, I, a verb, went, and a predicate, to the lighthouse. Another complete full clause would just be I went. It's a complete sentence. We're just dealing with complete sentences right now. So I'm not going to explain dependent clauses yet because you don't necessarily have to know that for this section, but let's just jump right into number 1. You'll notice number 1 has 2 independent clauses, and in the middle of those 2 independent clauses are the words and, but, or, for, nor, so, and yet. These words are problem words because people don't usually know how to use a comma with them. People don't know how to punctuate them correctly. I'm going to explain to you the proper use of these words right now. And I'm also going to include the examples I discuss below the video so you can see how the sentence is constructed. Let's do an example of number 1. I went to the lighthouse. That is the first independent clause. I went to the lighthouse. Now what we're going to do next is we're going to add an and. I went to the lighthouse and, now I could say I went to the lighthouse and laundromat. That would not require a comma. That would just be a bare and in the middle of the sentence. If we wanted a pure example of number one, this is what we would need to do. I went to the lighthouse and I bought a hot dog. You'll notice I bought a hot dog is a complete idea. It has me being repeated. It has I again. I went to the lighthouse and I bought a hot dog. Because and is coming in between two complete ideas, two complete sentences, it must have a comma. Now, anytime you use one of these words, you need to think very hard. Do I have two complete ideas surrounding it? Are they two complete sentences and is and sitting in the middle of them? If they are, then it must have that comma. And it's the same with all of these words. I went to the lighthouse, but I bought a hot dog. That would need a comma as well. I went to the lighthouse, or I bought a hot dog. Do you see what's happening there? As long as you have that complete sentence surrounding and, but, or, for, nor, so, or yet, you must use a comma in that situation. Now, one of the things I want to point out real quick, this is not a good handout to use to correct your papers. You can do that, but it's going to take forever. The best way to do this is to use this handout to write sentences. If you are looking at this handout and you want to use one of those words, you'll never screw it up because you'll know two complete sentences around that word. Those words in the middle, by the way, those are called conjunctions. And there are different forms of those words. Now, let's move on. Number two is always confusing. I don't like to spend too much time on it, but I kind of have to. People get very scared of the piece of punctuation that's in front of or. That is called a semicolon. In number two, we have two complete sentences, independent clauses, surrounding a semicolon. You can also use a period. What people don't understand about semicolons is that they, in almost every single circumstance, there's one rule where this isn't true. You can actually directly substitute the semicolon with a period. It just comes between two complete sentences. There's been a lot of weird debate about this. Why do we have them if you can just put a period in there? It's very strange, but that's the way English is. What does this do? What kind of sentence do we construct with this? Well, let's take a look. If we have two complete sentences, you can separate them either with a semicolon or a period. Let's do the same sentence again. I went to the lighthouse, semicolon. I bought a hot dog. That is correct punctuation. We also could say, I went to the lighthouse, period. I bought a hot dog. Now, what does the semicolon mean? What's the difference between the semicolon and the period? Well, a semicolon joins sentences together that have some type of really strong relationship. If I use a semicolon when I say I went to the lighthouse, semicolon, I bought a hot dog, what I'm actually saying there is I bought a hot dog at the lighthouse. It's implied. You can still use a period in that context, but the semicolon is trying to show that relationship a little bit more. It just says there's a very, very close relationship between these two sentences. I would love to visit the lighthouse that sells hot dogs. That sounds really cool. Anyway, I'll put the examples of that below this video in the discussion forum so that you can see it. Number three. Number three is very good for you. Number three will let you create complex sentences and never make a punctuation mistake. What you're seeing with number three is more complicated conjunctions. Consequently, furthermore, however, moreover, therefore, nevertheless, in fact, indeed, thus, and then. These act the exact same way as they did in number one. except the punctuation is a little bit different. If we have two complete sentences surrounding one of these words, you use a semicolon and a comma. The reason we use a semicolon is, again, because we have two complete sentences being joined together and they have a very careful relationship. You don't necessarily have to worry about the mechanics of this. You just need to understand what this sentence form looks like. Let me do a couple of examples. I went to the lighthouse. Consequently, I bought a hot dog. Do you see how that works? You punctuate it with a semicolon and a comma around the word that's in the middle. Again, I'll put these examples underneath so that you can see how it's working. I went to the lighthouse. Moreover, I bought a hot dog. The same punctuation every time. The real strength of this handout is that you can use it to construct sentences using different forms. You can make them look all sorts of different ways. And that's good because you want to be able to write sentences that all look different. You want to have a variety of sentences. Now, what we're going into next, and I'm actually not sure if I'm going to completely fit all of this into one video. I might need to do a part 2. We're going to see how far we can get. And if it cuts off, I'll do a part 2 to continue this lesson. What I need to explain to you now is what a dependent clause is. Let's think for a minute. If an independent clause is a complete sentence, what's a dependent clause? A dependent clause would logically be an incomplete sentence. It's something that's not full. It's not complete. What's an example of this? Well, we haven't talked about prepositions yet, but just follow along with me. To the lighthouse is a prepositional phrase. At the pier, at the lighthouse. These aren't complete sentences. They are fragmented in some way. We don't have a subject, actually. We have a direction. We actually don't even have a verb. You might be able to put a verb into a dependent clause, but the real essence of this is that we don't have a complete idea. That is a dependent clause. Now, believe it or not, there are grammatical situations that you can use when an incomplete sentence is correct. But you have to know how to punctuate it correctly. And this really throws lots of students off. I see many students make this mistake. And in fact, this is where we get into that problem where putting a comma where you pause is very problematic. If you put commas in where you pause, you're going to screw it up because of these rules. Let's see if we can cover at least one of these, hopefully before this video cuts out. We'll see how far we can get. Let's take a look at number 1. These are subordination clauses, and these are halfway down the page. This is where people get screwed up. Take a look at those words in the middle of number 1. After, although, because, if, since, when, as, before. These are words that we use when we have an incomplete idea in a sentence that is itself complete. I know this probably sounds really confusing, but follow along with me for a minute. When we take a complete sentence, sometimes we can put with it an idea that is itself not complete. Let's look at number 1 and see if we can figure out how this works. And I'm going to see if the 14-minute mark cuts off, because that could be potential. Let's see, we got like 5 seconds left. How are you guys today? I know I'm being really boring right now, but I want to take my time with this. Okay, I'm at the 14-minute mark. Let's see if we can discuss number 1. Number 1 starts with a complete sentence. Let's use the same exact complete sentence we've been using. I went to the lighthouse. If we put in one of those words, I went to the lighthouse after going to the park. I went to the lighthouse after going to the park. Going to the park is not a complete sentence. There's no subject to it. There's no noun. There's no one performing action. I went to the lighthouse after going to the park. Now, this is where everyone gets screwed up. No comma needed. There is no comma needed when we add an incomplete idea with one of those words. Many of you guys would hear that sentence, I went to the lighthouse after going to the park. Many of you would have put a comma there. It does not go there. Let's see if the 15-minute mark cuts us off. I'm going to conclude this video right now, and let's see if it uploads completely. If it does, I'll continue with part 2. So I'll see you in the next video.